Hey, if you're a first-time homebuyer, this video is for you. Hey guys, Orba here. In today's video, we're gonna go over my top 6 tips for first-time homebuyers. Alright, so let's jump straight into it. The first tip is stay organized. This is an easy tip, but it's one that's often overlooked and it causes problems later on. So what I mean by staying organized is keeping digital copies of your tax returns, your W-2s, pay stubs, driver's license, social security card. If you have an employment authorization card, a copy of that. If you're self-employed, a copy of your balance sheet and a profit loss statement. And also if you're self-employed and also on a trade work that's maybe plumbing or electrician or you're a mechanic, there's usually some sort of a certification or license that you've been given. So I would recommend to even have a copy of that, to have a digital copy, and keep these all uploaded somewhere that you know you could easily access. And the reason I say this is because people will usually put this off and they'll say, you know what, I have a copy of my tax return, it's somewhere in my room, and if I can't access it, I'll ask my accountant. Or I thought I had my social security card in this one filing cabinet, or whatever the case is. And then whenever time comes that they need it, they end up scrambling around, or if they need to log on to some sort of an online website to retrieve some of the information, all of a sudden they realize they forgot the password. So don't keep this on the back burner. If you know that you're already in the talks, start organizing this and put it together, because your loan officer will be asking for at least 90% of those things I listed, they're gonna be asking for it. So the second thing I have on my list here is get your credit checked early on. So this is also one of those things that a lot of people don't think about, just because they don't see the reason behind it. Why would I check my credit early on? And the reason is because mistakes are reported all the time. I mean, it's not like it's 50% of the time, but and it's hard to give a percentage, but there is a small chance that mistakes are reported on your credit report, and you don't want to discover that mistake once you start shopping. You don't want this problem to come up at that last minute, and then you realize that if you wanted to go and take care of this problem, you're going to miss out on your dream home. And if you move forward and you end up taking a higher interest rate because your credit wasn't as good, well, guess what? Now you're stuck in a loan that you're paying maybe thousands more in interest over the term of its life, And even if you decide to refinance out of that, even a refinance still has costs. Even whenever the costs are rolled in, there's still a cost to refinancing, right? So it's better to start the transaction on the right foot. So my third tip is give yourself time. And this kind of ties back into tip number 1 and 2, but it emphasizes more on timing. So whether it was that credit report I was telling you about, or figuring out your driver's license situation, or social security card, or tax documents, by giving yourself time and working on this stuff well in advance, you could find these problems early on. So some people find out that their driver's license is on the verge of expiring within a month. That's one thing that a lot of people overlook. Or they realize that their address on their driver's license hasn't been updated, or there's something that needs updating to be done and they just haven't gotten around to doing it. And by starting early, you could filter out all this stuff and then know that none of this stuff is going to come up later on. You at least did your part and it's ready. So the fourth tip I have is understand that it's okay to ask questions. If you're working with somebody who makes you feel bad for asking questions, you're working with the wrong person. Because if you're a first-time homebuyer specifically, this is likely going to be the biggest purchase of your life up to now. So it's obvious that you're going to have a ton of questions. So you don't want to fall into this thing where you have questions and you're not asking. Put them together. Maybe let those questions kind of add up, bundle them up, and then shoot questions to your realtor, shoot questions to your loan officer. This way they could actually go through those questions and reassure you if there is anything that they could reassure you, or if they could shed light on any problems, they could shed light on those things early on and solve those problems. But the important takeaway is don't be afraid to ask questions. It's normal, and you should ask as many as you have, because you don't want to leave something out and then you get later on in the process and then you find out that the answer to that question you had is now kind of detrimental to the deal, and you don't know if you're comfortable moving forward. So ask those questions, get your answers, and just kind of move forward with a clear mind. So tip number 5 is one of the most important ones and probably the most complicated ones, and that is figure out what you want. It's not as simple as it sounds. It really takes time. You know, if you're purchasing with a spouse, you guys need to do this together. If you're buying for yourself or you're with your family, you have to sit down and figure out what you want. Whether it's the real estate side of it and figuring out the location, maybe you want to be in a certain pocket of a specific neighborhood, or if you want, you know, a pool, or if you need a specific amount of bedrooms, figure out the things that you cannot live without. You need to have these things, and these are things that you really want. And then you could relay this information over to your agent, and then they could do a good job for you by delivering on all these things. And if they can't deliver, at least they could tell you why they can't deliver. If there are certain expectations that need to be set straight, they could do their job and tell you that as well. Now, from a home loan perspective, it's also important to know what you want. And by that, I mean figuring out what type of monthly payment you could comfortably afford. And I mentioned in previous videos how important it is to work backwards. Figure out a monthly payment that is the maximum amount that you could comfortably afford, and use that to figure out what purchase price you could go for. Because the bank is going to give you, you know, their ultimate, pre-approval amount. But just because you're pre-approved for that amount doesn't mean that that's what you want, because that may take away from all the other things that you're doing in your life, whether it's taking a vacation or just, you know, signing your kids up to certain things. Whatever the case is, you just want to know that it's important for yourself to figure out what monthly payment you could live with, and also what kind of terms do you want. You know, maybe you want a 15-year fix. You know, given that most of our clients come in and they want a 30-year fixed, every once in a while you get somebody that wants a 15-year. You know, you get somebody that wants a different product. So it's okay, ask around and do a little bit of research yourself as well, and figure out what you want. And part of figuring out what you want, especially with home loans, you're going to have to talk with your loan officer, because it's a little bit more complicated. There may be stuff out there that you don't even know about. You may not know that, you know, one example I always like to give is people think that FHA loans are just perfect for people who don't have a big down payment. But it's also really good for people who have a lot of expenses and their debt to income ratio is high. Or it's really good for people who may have not so perfect credit scores. You know, so these are things that people tend to overlook all the time. And you just will only figure this out by figuring out what you actually want and getting clear about that, then relaying that information over. So the 6th tip, and the most important one in my opinion, is work with people you're comfortable with. And what I mean by this is, if your agent or your loan officer says, hey, I want you to use this insurance agent because they do a great job, or if they say, I want you to use this loan officer, or I want you to use this realtor, you have to feel comfortable enough to say no if you want to say no. Now, if you want to take their referral because you seriously don't have anybody, then that's great. You should, you know, it's good that they're giving you an option or giving you 2 options. Take those options and, you know, look into those referrals. Just like any industry, there's people that are pushy. There's pushy salesmen, there's pushy people in every industry out there. And in our industry, the type of pushiness that comes along is people referring out work to other people. And sometimes clients get turned off by that, and rightfully so. Nobody should feel like they're being pushed into the corner because their loan officer says, trust me, if you don't use this agent, it's just not going to work out. Or if the vice versa, the agent comes to you and says, look, if you want to get a house, you have to use my loan officer, because if you don't use them, we have no hope. And I think that if you're good at listening to yourself, like if you trust your instincts, even from the first 2 or 3 times you meet somebody, you're probably going to get a feel for that. If they're already the pushy type, or if they're the type that is just rubbing you the wrong way, you could probably figure that early on. But some people tend to go further on in the process, and then they come across these problems. Now, I do want to say that these tips are just my tips. I'm not saying that these are the top tips for everybody out there. I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there who have completely different tips, but these are the ones that I've noticed, and I just thought it was important to bring to you guys' attention. So if there's any tips that I left out that you guys think are super important, drop it down there, and let your fellow first-time home buyers know about them. And I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.